My dear friend, tonight, let us sit quietly, as if the world has softened and all the noise has fallen away. I wish to speak with you about something both deeply personal and profoundly universal, the spiritual meaning of being single. In our society, there is a great expectation placed upon companionship, partnership, and union. Yet there are moments, long periods even, when one finds oneself alone, not merely physically, but in heart and spirit. And it is in these moments that the soul speaks most clearly, if only we are willing to listen. Being single is often misunderstood. It is perceived as emptiness, lack, or incompleteness. People whisper, "Why are you alone? You must find someone." And yet, I have observed that singlehood is not a void. It is a sacred space. It is an invitation to discover, to nurture, and to understand oneself in ways that cannot always be achieved within the embrace of another. Solitude, when embraced, is not punishment but blessing. It is not loneliness but profound companionship with one's own soul. Many fear being single because they equate it with absence. And yet, absence is not the same as presence. To be present with oneself is to cultivate a deep awareness of one's thoughts, feelings, and desires. To sit in the stillness of one's own heart, to breathe in the rhythm of one's own being, is to touch something eternal. In this presence, one discovers that the self is not lacking, it is vast, complex, and endlessly rich. There is a story I wish to share with you, one that illustrates this truth. In a quiet village by the river, there lived a young woman named Celine. From a young age, she watched her peers pair off, marry, and build lives together. She, too, longed for connection, yet somehow found herself alone. At first, she feared it. She believed that to be single was to be incomplete. But over time, she began to notice something remarkable. In her solitude, she could listen to the birds, to the river, to the soft whisperings of her own heart. She could write, paint, walk, and simply be. And in these quiet moments, she discovered a depth of self that she had never known in the presence of others. Celine realized that being single was not a void to be filled, but a space to be honored. She began to cultivate her own garden, her own dreams, her own passions. And in doing so, she found that her soul was not lonely, it was awake. It was vibrant, alive, and capable of connection that did not depend on another. She had discovered the spiritual meaning of her solitude, she was whole. To be single is to learn intimacy with oneself. Most people confuse intimacy with closeness to another, yet the deepest intimacy begins within. To know oneself fully, to recognize desires, fears, shadows, and light, is to cultivate a relationship that is unshakable. It is here, in this sacred solitude, that one learns self-love, patience, and understanding. And it is this inner relationship that prepares the heart for any future union, should it come, not out of need, but out of choice. There is also a spiritual rhythm to singlehood that is often overlooked. When one is not distracted by the dynamics of a partnership, one can hear the subtle pulse of life more clearly. The seasons, the cycles, the quiet patterns of existence reveal themselves. Meditation, contemplation, prayer, or simple reflection become easier, richer, and more profound. In the absence of another, the soul speaks in whispers, guiding, teaching, and awakening truths that might otherwise remain hidden. Many fear being single because it highlights loneliness, yet it is precisely in the confrontation with one's own company that fear dissolves. When we sit quietly, observing our thoughts without judgment, when we breathe with our own presence, we learn resilience. We learn that we are capable of completeness, joy, and peace without reliance on another. We learn that the soul is not empty, that it contains its own light, and that it can illuminate the path ahead even in darkness. Consider the psychology of this spiritual journey. Being single often forces reflection, self-examination, and growth. The distractions of a partnership, the compromises, the routines, the constant exchange of energy, are absent, leaving space for one to cultivate inner life. This cultivation is not selfishness, it is preparation, understanding, and alignment with one's true essence. It is a recognition that before we can fully give to another, we must first know, nurture, and embrace ourselves. I remember another story, of a man named Elias. He had spent much of his youth searching for companionship, longing for the connection that society said was necessary. And yet, life led him into periods of solitude, long stretches in which he was completely alone. At first, He resisted, feeling incomplete, anxious, and restless. But gradually, he learned to walk with himself. He began journaling, meditating, observing the world around him with quiet attentiveness. And in doing so, he discovered that his soul had depth and richness that no relationship could provide. He found joy in small things, connection in nature, and wisdom in silence. By the time he did meet a partner, he was whole, not dependent, not desperate, but fully present and ready to share from a place of completeness. Being single also teaches the art of patience. In a society that prizes immediacy, instant gratification, and constant engagement, solitude is a teacher of timing. It reminds us that union is not the ultimate goal, growth, understanding, and self-awareness are. It whispers that love is not a need to be fulfilled, but a presence to be shared. And it shows that the rhythm of the soul cannot be rushed, that each season of life has its lessons, and that patience is a gift that can only be learned in quiet reflection. There is a delicate paradox here. Singlehood can feel like absence, yet it is full of presence. It can seem isolating, yet it is expansive. It can appear to be waiting, yet it is active with growth. The spiritual meaning of being single lies precisely in this paradox, the recognition that what we often mistake for lack is actually abundance, and what we fear as emptiness is actually fertile ground for insight, wisdom, and self-discovery. Those who embrace singlehood spiritually often develop a profound sense of autonomy. They are not bound by external expectations or pressures, they are guided by internal awareness. This autonomy is not isolation, it is freedom. Freedom to explore, to create, to cultivate inner richness, and to connect with others from a place of fullness rather than need. It is a liberation that many never achieve, even within relationships, because they have not first walked alone. And there is also a spiritual humility in singlehood. To be alone is to confront the limits of control, the impermanence of life, and the necessity of acceptance. It teaches surrender, not surrender to another, but surrender to the rhythm of life, to the flow of being, to the wisdom that arises naturally when we stop resisting. In this surrender, the soul discovers resilience, clarity, and a profound sense of peace. I wish to share one final story, a small parable, to illustrate this truth. In a remote valley, there lived an elder named Amara, who had chosen to live alone for much of her life. Travelers often asked her why she remained single, why she did not seek companionship. And she would smile, walking slowly among her gardens, and reply, "I am learning the language of my own soul. In this solitude, I hear the whispers of life. I understand the rhythm of my thoughts, the depth of my heart, and the vastness of being itself. I am not lonely, for I am fully present. When the time comes to share my presence, I will do so from fullness, not lack." Her words reveal a profound truth. Being single is not a failure, a deficiency, or a pause until something better arrives. It is a sacred journey, a period of cultivation, a spiritual practice in its own right. It is a chance to encounter the self, to listen deeply, to grow in wisdom and compassion. And it is in this encounter that the soul learns the most enduring lessons. Love, patience, presence, and understanding arise not from another, but from the depths of one's own being. So, my dear friend, consider this: solitude is not emptiness, it is richness. Being single is not a void, it is a sanctuary. And within that sanctuary, the soul can flourish, reflect, and awaken. It is a time to befriend oneself, to explore the inner landscapes, to cultivate presence, and to prepare the heart for whatever may come, not out of need, but out of choice, understanding, and spiritual fullness. Embrace your own company. Sit with your thoughts. Listen to your heart. Tend the garden of your soul. And in this sacred space, you will discover that being single is not merely a stage of life, it is a profound opportunity to understand the deepest truth of existence, that wholeness, love, and peace begin within. And now, my friend, let us look deeper into the gift that singlehood offers, the space for quiet transformation. It is often in solitude, when no one else's expectations press upon us, that the soul begins to speak with clarity. The stillness becomes a mirror, reflecting not what is missing, but what is present. Here, we discover strengths we had not noticed, wisdom we had overlooked, and a sense of presence that no relationship can fully bestow. Many who embrace this stage of life spiritually find that it cultivates profound self-trust. They learn to rely upon their own inner compass, to honor their intuition, and to make choices from a place of deep alignment with their authentic self. There is a remarkable freedom in this trust, a freedom from the need for constant validation, from the anxiety of expectation, and from the fear of being incomplete. When one walks alone yet fully present, one walks empowered, grounded, and awake. I remember a story, quietly told in a village by the mountains. A young man named Taran had always sought companionship, believing that love was the measure of a life well lived. Yet life carried him into long periods of solitude. At first, he despaired, feeling the emptiness as a weight upon his chest. But gradually, he began to explore the spaces within himself. He walked the hills, observed the rhythm of the seasons, tended a small garden, and listened to the silent music of the world. Over time, Taran realized that solitude was not a void, it was a teacher. In the quiet, he confronted his fears, acknowledged his desires, and discovered a depth of being he had never known. He began to create, to write, to reflect, and to notice the simple miracles that surrounded him, the way sunlight touched the leaves, the rhythm of a bird's song, the whisper of wind through the grass. In this practice, he discovered something profound: he was complete, even alone. Being single, spiritually, is an invitation to cultivate presence. It asks us to sit with our own minds, to feel our own hearts, and to observe the subtle patterns of life as they unfold. It teaches patience, for the soul cannot be hurried. It teaches humility, for the self is revealed gradually, layer by layer, in quiet moments of reflection. And it teaches gratitude, for even in solitude, life continues to offer beauty, insight, and connection in forms that do not depend on another. There is also a profound spiritual intimacy in singlehood. One learns to befriend one's own shadow, to sit with discomfort, to hold one's own sadness, joy, and longing with compassion. The inner life becomes a sanctuary, a sacred space where growth, healing, and creativity emerge naturally. And in this sanctuary, one finds that the deepest love is not first received from another, but first nurtured within. Consider the lessons of nature. A tree grows alone in the field, yet it reaches toward the sky, spreads roots into the earth, and flourishes with its own strength. The river flows alone for miles, carving valleys, nourishing life, and carrying wisdom from mountain to sea. In solitude, nature thrives, not in the presence of companionship, but in the integrity of being fully itself. Similarly, to walk the path of singlehood spiritually is to honor the wholeness of one's own existence. There is a subtle beauty in the rhythm of a single life. One learns to move with life's tides without distraction, to attend to subtle signals of heart and mind, to cultivate the gifts of observation, reflection, and mindfulness. One discovers that happiness and fulfillment are not always derived from another, but from one's own engagement with life, creativity, and presence. I want to share one final reflection, a parable of quiet wisdom. A woman named Seraphine lived in a small cabin by a lake. She had never married, and for many years, she had worried that her life was incomplete. Yet as the seasons passed, she began to notice the depth of her own being. She would sit by the lake at dawn, feeling the water's surface, listening to the wind, and observing the dance of light and shadow. In her solitude, she discovered a companion that was constant and unwavering, her own self. She wrote poetry, tended her garden, and spoke with the creatures that shared her world. And in these moments, she understood a profound truth: being single was not a lack, but a sacred opportunity. Seraphine realized that the spiritual meaning of being single was not simply about waiting for someone else to arrive, it was about awakening to the richness of one's own life. It was about embracing the present, tending to one's inner world, and recognizing that fulfillment, love, and growth could exist fully, even in solitude. She learned that union, when it came, would be an enhancement, not a requirement. She was whole before any connection, and that wholeness radiated outward, attracting companionship naturally, without fear or need. So, my dear friend, consider this: to be single is to hold a sacred space within yourself. It is to cultivate self-awareness, patience, creativity, and presence. It is to sit with your own heart, to listen to your own mind, and to honor the journey of the soul in solitude. And in doing so, you discover something extraordinary. Being single is not emptiness, it is abundance. It is not loneliness, it is depth. It is not a pause, it is a profound, sacred season of life, full of spiritual meaning, growth, and illumination. Embrace your solitude. Nurture your inner garden. Walk your path with presence, reflection, and compassion. And know this, your wholeness does not depend on another. Your joy does not rely on external validation. Your life, even when lived alone, can be rich, vibrant, and spiritually profound. In this understanding, my friend, the soul discovers freedom. Freedom from fear, from comparison, from expectation. Freedom to grow, to explore, to create, and to love deeply, not only others, but the self. And in this freedom, one realizes the ultimate lesson of singlehood: the heart that is fully awake and fully present is never truly alone.